to the entertaining Talkin' Sports.
What is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video. And in this video, I'm going to be, kind of combining two topics, making it a quick video. Unfortunately, I was working all day today, did not have enough time to get these videos up in a timely manner. I will have a Gettleman project up tomorrow. I was going to attempt to have it done by tonight, but just way too busy today. But I will have a Gettleman project up tomorrow where I will start simulating potential draft day trades. My first draft day trade will be with the Chargers, and I will simulate what players that I would pick if I was Dave Gettleman in that situation, both in the first and second round. So hopefully you guys check that out. But today there was some pretty big news with the New York Giants. The New York Giants, I think, finally hired their last member of the coaching staff. He will be an offensive assistant. I did a little bit of research on him. There wasn't much to see. Stephen Brown, who was a former assistant with Jason Garrett, we'll get into him in a second, as they continue to bring on guys that are familiar with Jason Garrett's system. They brought on Mark Colombo, a number of other guys that have worked with Garrett in the past who have some familiarity. And it seems as if Joe Judge is putting trust in Jason Garrett. And I personally think Jason Garrett was probably not a Joe Judge hire. Obviously, Jason Garrett has ties to this organization. He's played with the Giants. Mara has said nothing but great things about him. Obviously, there was rumors that Mara and the Giants were potentially interested in bringing him in as a head coach. So I think that was a Mara hire, but Joe Judge seems to be on board with giving Jason Garrett a lot of personnel say. Because in my opinion, this is just another guy that Garrett said, listen, I want to bring this guy on. He knows my offense. He knows how it works. And Joe Judge gave him, the go-ahead. So it's just another instance of Judge working with guys on his team and trying to bring in the best guys that he thinks fit this team. He's also has some experience working in the running game. And, of course, we know that the Dallas Cowboys have, had great success with the running game. Of course, they had a great offensive line, but maybe that'll add something to the New York Giants offense. The other piece of news that I wanted to touch on was Daniel Jones is working very hard. And he's doing the same thing that Eli Manning did when he was with the New York Giants. Eli Manning, of course, learned under the same coach that Daniel Jones did. That was the common denominator. They both learned under Cutcliffe. Cutcliffe, of course, is the head coach at Duke, which is where Daniel Jones played. But for years, Eli Manning would work in the offseason with his wide receivers at Duke with Cutcliffe, way before OTAs and mandatory minicamp. And, I remember back, I say it all the time. I remember back when Eli Manning won his second Super Bowl the year before. He was on high school football fields practicing with Victor Cruz, putting the work in. And Daniel Jones today was doing the same thing, and that's incredibly encouraging. And what's even more encouraging is the young receivers on this roster, the leader of the wide receiving corps, Sterling Shepard. We're talking 2 days after the Super Bowl. A lot of football players like Golden Tate. I'm not getting on Golden Tate. By all means, enjoy, your months off after football. It's a tough game. He's on vacation, but these guys are working hard. You had both Sterling Shepard and Darius Slayton go to Duke today to practice with Daniel Jones. And I'll tell you what, and I'm going to get into the quotes in a second, I think Daniel Jones is in for a big sophomore season. I could be wrong. I've been wrong in the past, but I love the way that Daniel Jones finished this year. I expressed that in my later videos, and I was tough on Daniel Jones. And, I'll be the first to say it. I made him earn my respect, and he's earned it. Now, he's still got a lot of things to work on. He's got to work on his pocket awareness. He's got to read defenses, like Kurt Warner said recently. I think that is a very fair criticism, but that's a common criticism with rookie quarterbacks going into his second year. The other thing he's going to have to overcome is the playbook. He's got to learn a completely new playbook. But one thing you could say about Daniel Jones, especially early on in this offseason, this guy is working hard. There's probably not many quarterbacks who are out there throwing footballs, practicing for next season just 2 days after the season completed. So you got to like what you hear about Daniel Jones. You got to like what you hear about these young receivers. Of course, him and Darius Slayton had great chemistry throughout the year. And, I'm incredibly excited to see what they could do in year two under this new offense. It's going to be a challenge. There's no doubt about it. It's a completely new system. They had the West Coast offense last year. Now they've got a completely new system that Jason Garrett wants to instill. But I do think that they're going to focus more on the ground game, which I think should help the passing game and Daniel Jones to create more efficient passing opportunities. Of course, we're going to have to wait and see how this roster is constructed. But so far, so good, in my opinion, with the New York Giants this offseason. I think they're getting a good support system in terms of coaches around Daniel Jones and this offense. And, hopefully defense as well. Now it's just a matter of bringing in the talent and developing the young talent that's already on the roster. But great stuff coming out of Daniel Jones going to Duke with the young receivers today. First thing I'll touch on is the new coach, Stephen Brown, which, I touched on a little bit at the beginning of the video. The Giants are hiring former Cowboys offensive assistant to the head coach Stephen Brown as an offensive assistant for the New York Giants. Of course, he was an assistant with Jason Garrett. Brown worked closely with Jason Garrett with the Cowboys for 4 years, plus he also helped coach running backs. He also, I'm pretty sure from what I read in his bio, was an assistant coach with the Buffalo Bills. So he has a lot of experience throughout the NFL. I think he was also with Syracuse, if I'm not mistaken, in a very similar role for a number of years. So I think that will complete the coaching staff. From what I read, it's possible they will bring on one more defensive assistant, but that should be the last guy that they bring on, at least for the offense, and it's just another guy familiar with Jason Garrett. And I think that's important. You got a lot of players on this team, on the offense specifically, that, it's going to be much harder, especially with Daniel Jones, a second-year quarterback. You want as many guys that are familiar with this offense to coach it as you can get. Because, and I love the quarterback coach, by the way, even though he doesn't have any affiliation to Jason Garrett. I think he's going to break down the playbook very well for Daniel Jones, and I think he'll assist him. But there's just another guy that I think is familiar with Jason Garrett, that's familiar with the system, that should be able to help the Giants out in a big way. Next thing I wanted to touch on was the story about Daniel Jones. This was reported on by Ryan Dunleavy. Darius Slayton and Sterling Shepard in attendance. That, of course, was in response to the tweet that was tweeted out by Jordan Rannon, which was this, talking about Daniel Jones. And then, that was later said that both of them were in attendance working with Daniel Jones. Jordan Rannon had to say this. 2 days after the Super Bowl, second-year Giants quarterback Daniel Jones has some of his receivers down at his alma mater, Duke, for some workouts. Impressive. The tradition continues. Eli Manning used to bring his receivers to Duke every year for some work. And you know what? That's what makes players great. That's what makes Tom Brady great. Tom Brady's arguably the greatest quarterback who ever lived, and that guy puts in more work than anybody. You hear stories all the time about him. You can't get him out of the facility. He's in the training camp, in the special teams meetings, rather. He's all over the team. And he breathes football. And that is what I love hearing about Daniel Jones, man. This guy's got a great attitude. He's a hard worker. He's a great leader for the New York Giants. And I cannot wait to see what he does in year 2. And it's already starting in the offseason. Obviously, we got a lot to go. We got the draft, everything else. But Daniel Jones is going to be the most important piece for this Giants team, not just for next year, but hopefully for the next 15. We hope that Daniel Jones could give us what Eli did for 15, 16, 17 years. We want that next franchise quarterback, and Daniel Jones, so far this offseason, is putting in the work necessary to do so. You got to love what he's doing there. Cutcliffe, of course, did this with Eli Manning, like what Jordan Rannon said and I said earlier in the video, for a number of years. And for a number of years, it paid dividends. Victor Cruz, that 1 year, I like I always say, developed great chemistry with Eli Manning. And Darius Slayton and Sterling Shepard both showed great chemistry. Of course, they were banged up. Well, not so much Slayton. Slayton was banged up, more so before the year started. Shepard was banged up throughout the year. But when they were on the field, both of them looked as if they had pretty good chemistry with Daniel Jones, specifically Darius Slayton. And I expect Darius Slayton to have a big year this year for the Giants. I do think, depending on what they do in terms of the draft of free agency at the wide receiver position, but if they're going into the year with the receiving core that they have for the most part, I do think Slayton is in for a big year, because I think of all the receivers on this team, he fits it the best. He's also had, obviously the best chemistry with Daniel Jones year 1 to year 2. They worked together in training camp, and obviously you saw that, pay dividends on the football field. I was at the Giant-Jet game where Darius Slayton had, two touchdowns, I think, almost 200 yards. And yeah, I think him and Daniel Jones have a lot of chemistry, and this should only help it. And I love hearing that in the offseason, that they're already getting to work, getting ready to have a huge jump in year 2 of Daniel Jones' career. And let's hope that hope we see it this year. Hopefully we see some positive things and things to build off of going into the 2020 season. As always, guys, if you like what you watch, please subscribe, drop a comment, maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.